What's up guys, Asian here
Oh,
with a
it
video that has
expires the
been
week right
long
too.
overdue. So really quickly, this is old footage just because I didn't want you guys just to watch just my desktop basically as I make this video. So this is a very, very old stream. This was our last Mayflower raid, so this was probably about a year and a half ago. So hopefully you guys can kind of get a glimpse into the past of ESO and kind of what I was doing way back when I used to play. But as I was saying, this video was a long time in the making, so about a month ago I said I would make a video clearing up a couple of common misconceptions and basically addressing some misinformation about ESO that is fairly common among all the different sort of social media channels that ESO has. The subreddit, the forums, the Discord, even some in-game guilds back when I used to play. This information was present, so I kind of wanted to clear it up. There's also been a certain content creator who has really been espousing a lot of these misconceptions, and while they don't really have a very large audience, there is always a chance that a new player might come across their videos and end up taking what they are saying,
This is it.
as
Last
gospel, basically, and really
raid.
believe what they're saying.
Uh,
So this is just sort of my
well, it wasn't
um, my
last raid,
take on
but
trying to
last
clear up a
raid,
lot of these
kinda.
misconceptions here. So this video isn't really going to be covering them all in great detail. This is just going to kind of be a very surface level of the different misconceptions here. I have 5 that I want to cover. There'll be future videos that will go more in depth behind each of these different misconceptions, why the misconceptions, and what is the truth basically of what's happening behind ESO. So the first misconception that I see is the idea that tooltips, your damage numbers, the floating damage numbers, and your character sheets, that those numbers are the most important parts of your build. And while they are things you want to consider when you're making a build, they also don't paint a complete picture either. So tooltips, the skill tooltips specifically that I'm talking about here, those are only affected by your in-game statistics that are
Very
on your
good.
stat sheet. So basically, spell damage and max magicka. The values on your tooltips don't take into consideration things like damage done modifiers or any sort of debuffs that the boss has, so damage taken debuffs, as well as any sort of crit modifier as well. So it doesn't take into consideration crit chance and crit damage. So those stats, some of them are printed on your stat sheet. So crit chance, crit damage, for example, is on your stat sheet, your normal and advanced stat sheets, respectively. But your damage done, your damage taken debuffs on the boss specifically, they don't show up on your stat sheets, and they are not reflected on your tooltips. Now they are reflected on your
Rip. I
on
used my
your
standard. I'll be right back.
on the floating damage numbers, but they are not reflected on the tooltips at all. So if you're relying just on your tooltips to kind of get a gauge of how strong your build is, you're going to have a bad time, because while it is important to know how hard your abilities are hitting or what they are capable of hitting, they don't tell you the whole story. And again, I'll post another video probably later this week or early next week, kind of explaining how tooltips work and why they can be a little bit misleading. The second misconception I want to clear up here is about damage over time abilities. So damage over time abilities in ESO, most if not all of them do what's called dynamically update. So what this means is, depending on the specific bar that you are on, your damage over time abilities will deal damage based on the spell damage, your max magicka, crit chance, crit modifier, all those things on the bar you were on rather than the bar that they were cast from.
But
So the
what if
content
I don't
creator
have
that
the
I'm
skeleton bubble
thinking
board?
of, he likes to espouse that you should be running a lightning staff back bar for the AoE bonus damage that you would get on your back bar. And while this is not an
No, I
incorrect
definitely have it.
statement, it is a very misleading and very inaccurate statement in terms of creating the best build, because the passive buff from the lightning staff will only be active while you're on your back bar. As soon as you flip over to your front bar, if you
Want
have
to
an
buy
Inferno
something
staff
with
or
magical golden
a
coins?
daggers, for example, your dots will be using those statistics instead. And a typical PvE player will be spending about 70 to 75% of their time on their front bar. So realistically, you're losing quite a bit of damage, or I should say, you're not getting the benefit of your lightning staff back bar, because you're going to be on your front bar for a lot of the fight, and therefore you're not going to be getting the additional passive bonus from your lightning staff. Again, another video will be coming out sort of explaining how this dynamic update work, what stats are used, and so on. The next misconception is this idea that diminishing returns still exist in ESO. They do not. They used to exist in ESO back in the old CP system, so this would be back in CP 1.0. In the past, you had to put in a certain number of CP points in order to get a 1% increase in whatever node that you were using. That has obviously changed in CP 2.0, where now it's a flat increase, a flat number of points to get a certain value. So 10 CP points will get you additional 20 spell damage, for example. The old CP system, you would have to put in a certain number of CP points to get 1% additional damage done, for example. And as your percentage increases, you need to put in more CP points. So that would be an example of diminishing returns. Way back in the past as well, back during launch, ESO also had what are called soft caps. So once you hit a certain value in your max resources, your magicka, stamina, health, whatever, it becomes harder to get more of that resource. So for example, if the soft cap was 30,000 and you hit 30,000 magicka, something that gave you 1,000 magicka might only give you 750 instead. So that would be an example of diminishing returns, soft caps. Soft caps were removed after the 6th update, so 1.6. They removed diminishing returns from ESO because obviously it was not very popular among the players. So those of you guys who are older players might remember these soft caps. Again, I'll be going over more in depth behind diminishing returns and what I believe people are mistaking for diminishing returns instead. So basically, there's a concept called percent relative change that I think players are mistaking for diminishing return just due to the way that this property works. The fourth misconception I want to clear up is the idea that light attack weaving is a bug, or it is an exploit, or it's a glitch. Technically, light attack weaving is a bug. It was not intended to be in the game in the first place. The developers even released a statement on the forums, which you might be able to find, I'm not sure if it's still there, basically along the effects that light attack weaving was not intended and it was a side effect of basically the engine that they were using for the abilities. At the time that they released that statement, light attacks weaving had become accepted among the community, and so the developers decided to fully embrace light attack weaving entirely. So light attack weaving now is widely accepted. It is embraced by the devs. There's actually a help screen that describes light attack weaving and recommends that you do it in order to improve your overall damage. And so light attack weaving now is seen as essentially incredibly important and essential to doing good DPS, and not just for DPS but also for tanks and healers as well, in order to proc their enchants. Again, another video will be explaining light attack weaving, how important it is to DPS and why it's not a bug. The final misconception I want to cover is this idea that target dummies are not an accurate representation of in-raid DPS. There is some truth to this, and part of it is because the raid dummy provides certain buffs that in reality you would never get 100% uptime on. However, on the flip side of this, the target dummy also does not provide certain buffs that will be present in organized raid groups. So for an organized group, yes, the raid dummy will not be representative of your actual in-raid DPS because your in-raid DPS will actually be higher. For people in an unorganized group, it's also true because you will be missing out on debuffs that you might not see, or the target dummy will have buffs that you will never see in unorganized groups. And so your DPS in content will be lower than what you would see on the dummy. However, that does not mean the dummy is entirely useless. One of the key things that people use dummies for is to practice their rotation. And there's obviously been some controversy, or at least some discussion about how useful that is, because target dummies don't hit back, obviously. So a lot of people think that target dummies practice is not really all that useful, because target dummies don't hit back. I'll be going into why this is a misconception and why this is actually a harmful mindset to have in ESO, in a separate video. But those are the 5 different misconceptions that I will be covering in this sort of mini-series, kind of describing and going over all these different misconceptions and misinformation. Again, I believe that the only way to fight off misinformation is to release good information and clear up any sort of misunderstandings and misconceptions that people might have, and so basically defeat this misinformation that way. But that is it for this video. Again, I'll be releasing individual videos for each of these 5 different misconceptions at a later date when I have time to sit down and make these videos. Hopefully it'll be by the end of this week or possibly by the start of next week. But I will be making specific videos going over these 5 points. But that is it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys later.